Hi, I'm Hendo, and today I'm showing you 7 different ways to add texture to your EVA foam. This is the result of experimenting with these techniques. I've made 10 different examples in total, and I'm going to briefly cover each one. If you want to see in detail how I made each of these textures, check out my collaboration video with Cosgear over on their channel. All techniques will be timestamped below along with materials, and the Cosgear App Planner is going to help make all of these steps really easy to see. So let's talk foam textures. One technique to add texture to foam is to use a soldering iron, which is used to melt solder for things like circuits or jewelry. But in cosplay, we use it for melting. You don't really need an even hand, but you are gonna need a kind of even rhythm. If you go too fast, there won't really be a chance for the surface of the foam to melt, and if you go too slow, you might actually melt all the way through your foam. But depending on your pattern, the process can be pretty forgiving. I especially like to use soldering with a bit of a scale pattern because the jaggedness of the melting really lends itself well to the texture. Overall, I think it requires an easy to medium skill level. Painting is really going to be easy with this texture, and it does add a bit of dimension. Another technique for foam texturing is heat pressing, where you heat up the surface of the foam and then press a texture into it. For this, I have 2 examples, one with aluminum foil to make this leather effect, and one with a 3D stamp to make this hex pattern. You often have to work in smaller sections at a time, just sort of heating it up, pressing, letting it cool. So it can be a little bit tedious, but it doesn't really require like a lot of brain juice. I use this leather texture for so many straps and accessories rather than using real leather. And with the stamping method, if you're gonna put this on like armor, you're gonna want to cut out all the pieces, stamp the texture in, and then assemble. Both of these are really easy to paint. The texture does most of the work for you. I think this is a pretty easy to acquire skill, and it works just as well from beginners all the way to pros. Puff paint is also a great way to add texture to your foam. You can do some simple line work and then cover it in a metal coat, which will make it look like embossing or filigree. You can really use any thick 3-dimensional material, but puff paint already comes in a convenient tube that's easy to use and is pretty affordable. You will want to make sure that you have a very steady hand, thick line work, and lots of dry time. Since it doesn't have those sharp edges that make it easy to paint, you're probably going to want to just do this all in one color. Overall, I think this is a medium to high level skill. It requires a pretty even hand for it to look nice, but I also think you can just do small bits in like corners or edges and trims, and it'll really add a pop of detail that makes it look extra good. A really fun way to add texture to foam is with stickers, which will lead to very clean results, though it can get a little bit expensive. You don't want to use regular flat stickers. You're going to want the ones that are slightly embossed or curved, especially those like scrapbooking quality stickers. As long as they're slightly puffy or 3D, they'll work. However, the adhesive isn't always the strongest, so you might have to reinforce that with a bit of extra glue. This is probably the easiest method to texture foam, but you are a little bit limited to the price and also the shapes that you can find. But definitely a very beginner-friendly skill. A fun and kind of magical way to add texture to your EVA foam is with scoring or cutting. Whereas when you sort of just press texture into foam, when you heat up the foam, it can lose some of that shape. If you cut into foam, adding heat actually sort of melts away the sides a little bit more and opens up the cut a little bit extra, making it more pronounced. With this in mind, you can cut a pattern like wood grain or burnished metal, then open up those cut lines to make the pattern more pronounced and really easy to paint. The hardest part here is just remembering to make all of your cut lines before you add heat. You can really only do the process once, so you just have to make sure you have all the steps in there. Aside from requiring a little bit of extra memory effort, this is a very easy, beginner-friendly skill. And if you're working with EVA foam, you probably also already have a rotary tool like a Dremel, and this is one of the best ways to add texture to your foam. There are lots of other tutorials from cosplayers about how to add some texture to your foam with their Dremel, but I've made these 2 examples, a really easy one that's battered stone, and this slightly more difficult one for carved bark. In this case, the Dremel takes care of most of the issues for texture, and so painting it is really easy, and it's actually pretty easy to get a very realistic looking effect. These are probably my favorite swatches, and I personally enjoy using a Dremel the most to create texture in my EVA foam, but I promise there are so many more options than just these 2 textures. I would say that this battered stone effect is a pretty easy skill level, and this carved bark one is maybe a little bit of a medium skill level, but both are very easy to paint. And finally, you can also texture your EVA foam with foam clay. I especially see it used for gums, teeth, spikes, and like scaly skin textures, along with a lot of other organic texture. I've used the foam clay to make these little spikes, but I'd avoid using it for anything much bigger or with more volume because it can take quite a while for it to dry all the way through. But this stuff is pretty versatile, even if you have zero experience with sculpting. I myself haven't really tried sculpting too much, but the foam clay is really easy to work with. Even just using your fingertips creates a really neat type of texture. Sometimes the foam clay doesn't want to stick to especially really dense EVA foam, but if you just add a little bit of glue to the surface, it'll stay just fine. I think this is definitely a beginner-friendly skill that's only going to sort of evolve and transform as you experiment with it more. And here's all the foam swatches next to each other so you can see and compare. How should I display these? I think they look really cool and I want to hang them up for some reason. And that's it. Now you know 7 different ways to texture your EVA foam. Again, if you want to see detailed step-by-step instructions for creating any of these textures, check out my collaboration video with Cosgear over on their channel. Thanks again to the Cosgear App Planner for making everything easy to organize and keep track of. I will have a link to it down below if you want to check it out too. And until next time, I'm Hendo. Stay crafty. No, I'm not busy. If you're gonna be up here, you're gonna be in my content. My name is Kirby. I'm super cute.